she has like, almost like a caseload, I would say. Fluctuates.
Do you do any counseling with the students, or do you do any of that kind of small group work or anything?
I have definitely run groups, and also very little counseling. I will sit and talk to a counselor or talk to a student if a counselor asks me to. But again, it's not so much about the issue necessarily, it's more about what's available to them. So I'd say there's a pretty big difference.
Beyond both of you then, is there someone who would be, besides like your guidance counselor, who does counseling with the kids, say on behavior type, like a behavior specialist, mental therapist kind of
No,
role?
not within the district. I mean,
We have guidance counselors.
Right.
On the secondary level, they're pretty much glorified secretaries, I'd call them, frankly. They schedule makers and this and that, and a lot of them end up very unhappy with that role.
I know where I taught, our guidance counselor did almost no actual counseling.
Now, the
A lot of it
elementary
was
kids.
administrative.
Yeah, it's an administrative role.
but I do see it at secondary, I do see the counseling piece too. I see them running into time conflicts. You know, if they're not in big enough time with the other responsibilities with scheduling and things like that. But that's been where my contact has come from, through interactions that they've had, you know, and then recognize that there are things that may be needed for a student.
Is that how students come to you? Are they referred by the guidance counselor or other staff?
Yes.
Mary's in charge of the SAP program too. Student assistance.
Do you mind if I tape anything that you have said that we can probably use?
No, that's fine.
Do you typically see lots of any Puerto Rican, specifically Puerto Ricans? Our research is focused on Puerto Rican and school social work on Puerto Ricans.
And see, and I would have a hard time answering that because I don't know specifically what the background may be. If they're Puerto Rican or Mexican or what, I may not, a lot of times I don't know that. So I wouldn't be able to say yes.
Kind of to reiterating what I said before.
So you
Mary
could
got
be
here.
responding to a student's problem without actually knowing if they're Mexican, or you just know that they're from another.
I mean, honestly, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound very good. I don't necessarily like the way that sounded. But, I mean, yes, I wouldn't know that there was a language barrier, but I wouldn't have a huge concern as to what nationality they actually were. I mean, that wouldn't, I'm scared to answer, wouldn't be of huge relevance, really, but should it be?
Normally when we're working in depth
Well,
with
you're
a,
not counseling, so.
with a person or with a family, that kind of stuff comes out. I mean, just, but it's not like on our checklist.
Yeah, right, that's probably pretty fair. I'm guessing it would come out. I mean, but then for me to say like, okay, I know they're from Puerto Rico.
And in my case, where I've been around, this is her first year, and she does not, as she gets to know the families more and more,
Mm-hmm.
that will come out more and more. There are families that I've worked with for years and years and years, and I know a lot about them, and I know where they're from, and that kind of thing. So odds are, if we're running into a situation where Spanish is involved, I will probably know where they're from. Just.
Are you regularly part of the team? Say, I asked Ms. McCormick, say at an IEP meeting, if it's a student that you have on like your caseload, would you automatically be sitting in on the IEP meeting?
She does a lot more of that arena
Oh,
than
sorry.
I do. Where she will transport people, she will help, if there's no phone, if there's problems with communications, et cetera. That's why when I was suggesting more like the case work,
Right.
that's the kind of thing.
I mean, and the two go hand in hand, like when there are attendance issues, it seems so many times there are other issues.
Mhm.
Right.
You know, but I'd say, I mean, there's a clear divide between attendance and referring on for, because sometimes it's just attendance.
But I bet frequently your paths cross
Oh,
with
yes.
families.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty much teamwork. And then a situation will arise or we hear something about it, we just kind of try to decide who's going to do what for the situation.
One more, do you mind?
No, I was just curious what the typical day of a social worker in this area would be like, a school social worker.
I think I really think it varies. I don't think any day looks the same. Visits to homes, I'd say that the majority of the time
You do
is
home visits as well?
home visits.
Mm.
Is a lot of what it is, a lot of meetings, if there's a situation with kids, you know, it could be that. It could be this situation pops up where they're suspecting some type of abuse, neglect, that takes its own time and work there. So, I mean, it really, I'd say it varies quite drastically. And I mean, I'd say my schedule it stays open and then fills up very quickly. You know, so I mean,
Well, we thought yesterday was going to be a slow day, and it wasn't thought a slow
I've been
day.
thinking this whole week was going to be a slow week, was kind of my expectation, but that is not.
So it sounds
Very
like you
true.
spend a lot of your time in actually direct contact and.
Oh, I think, yes. And a lot, what I have noticed is a lot with the family, not always directly with the student. It could be a lot of family work.
So if the problem is coming mainly from something in the family, how do you address that, being the school social worker?
Go to the home typically. I mean, you're called, I think it depends on, you know, what the situation is or how the family would respond. If somebody can give us some kind of information that, you know, it may be better to call first. But a lot of times we just go when we get information and we'll say, you know, we're understanding this is going on. You know, are you interested in anything, any type of services, any kind of help? Is there anything that we can do, you know, to help? I mean, a lot of times it goes from there, and then depending on how they respond, some are very receptive to that, some not so much. You know, so I think then depending on that, it could be a matter of helping them apply for access. I've spent many times turning in, you know, medical assistance packets.
You actually do that yourself?
Yeah, because a lot of times, I mean, the information is somewhat difficult, I think, for people. I mean, and it's a lengthy application, and actually, depending on what you're applying for, you don't have to apply for you don't have to fill the entire packet out. But if you don't know that, chances are you're going to fill that packet out. And a lot of times, pieces will be missing. And so I'll have, you know, I have a good relationship with the county assistance office, and I can call and ask about students and where they are in the process, and they will share that with me. So that, you know, I can make sure that documents are being turned in, and that kind of stuff.
And she has a lot of, like, she'll run into clientele who are frankly unable to do these things, and
Mhm.
really, she has to really do it for them. Or, in some cases, are just too preoccupied with their own things, and you know, they just don't do things that they probably could do if they really applied themselves. And then, for the benefit of the child, Mary will lead them through, you know, sometimes, you know, take the forms and just sit down
And sometimes it can take,
fill them out. And
can be endless to get somebody from point A to B, just because it's, you know, what we value as important, or what we, you know, it doesn't always necessarily mean somebody else does. And so, I mean, it can be a struggle.